This is America, and this is a country that has seen its biggest drop in the murder rate in more than 70 years. New FBI statistics say that violent crime dropped more than 10% between 2024 and 2025. That's the biggest drop since the federal government started tracking these figures back in 1936. We take a look at what's driving the numbers down as whether the trend is here to stay. But first, let's go to our Washington studio and Alex Marquardt.
Thanks, Rosalind. Around a year ago, Donald Trump declared an emergency here in Washington, D.C. He said crime was out of control and he deployed federal agents and National Guard troops to the nation's capital. Trump then expanded that approach across the country into cities mostly run by Democrats. Now the president wants to take credit for this historic drop in violent crime rates. But what does the data actually show? Here's Rosalind Jordan.
U.S. local news, all crime, all the time. In 2024, presidential candidate Donald Trump seized on the nation's panic.
You can't walk across the street to get a loaf of bread. You get shot, you get mugged, you get raped.
Trump said he alone could fix it.
I will make a record investment in hiring, retention, and training police officers.
Once back in office, Trump acted, ordering National Guard troops into the streets of Washington and Memphis, expanding anti-immigrant raids in Minneapolis and Los Angeles, as well as taking charge of the nation's Capitol Police. The new federal statistics released in July show his unorthodox approach worked. The U.S. murder rate is at its lowest in 70 years. Trump is declaring victory, but feels that alone won't convince his doubters.
We have the numbers down because of what the federal government's doing. We get no credit for it.
Violent crime is down across the United States, but it's not all necessarily due to Trump's policies. Research indicates that there were changes happening as early as 2023, before Trump returned to office. And those changes are due to changes in policing policy and tactics, economic and social conditions, and a wider use of technology. A new think tank report says life in 40 large U.S. cities actually became safer in the past year. Homicides, carjackings, robberies down. Drug crimes still rising. No change in the number of sexual assaults.
We will make America safe again.
For once, the White House is celebrating the headlines, hoping these reports will boost Republicans' chances in the midterm elections. Rosalind Jordan, Al Jazeera, Washington.
And here to discuss those crime rates and what they could mean for the upcoming midterm elections are Andre Perry. He is the director for the Center for Community Uplift at the Brookings Institution, and John Feehery, Republican strategist and former congressional staffer. Andre, John, thank you both for being with me today. This is a really interesting series of figures, which we're going to dive into. It is understandable that President Donald Trump wants to take credit for these historically low numbers coming out of last year. Andre, does he deserve it?
Well, there's no silver bullet when it comes to violent crime reduction, the pun intended there. So most research says that there's no one factor, particularly National Guard deployments or certainly hyperbolic rhetoric, that can reduce crime. It generally comes from macro forces, socioeconomic forces, income, education, job opportunities that either reduces or increases crime. We saw, one of the reasons why we saw a dramatic decline is because during the pandemic, we saw a spike. That spike was certainly a result or affiliated with job losses, income losses, so you saw crime increase. And so no one person can take credit. If anything, the crime started to reduce in 2023. And we've seen major drops in cities all across the country. So lots of people want to take credit for things, for crime, violent crime when it's going well. No one wants to take credit for when it's going poorly. But really, no one person can take credit for violent crime reduction.
Yeah, success has many fathers.
Yep.
John, you argue that Trump should declare victory. And do you think that's the case, even though the trend was relatively clear as he was taking office?
Of course. I mean, this is one of the best things about the Trump record is he can say violent crime is at an all-time low, and it's because of me. The question isn't so much if he's going to take credit. The question is, does it make any difference in the election?
Right.
And if you look at one of the things about solving problems like crime or immigration is it becomes less relevant to most voters, and then they vote on something else. And so for the president, yes, he should definitely take credit for the decline in crime. The thing he's got to focus on, though, is how does that implicate what's going on with the economy? Because to Andre's point, that's the number one issue. And if you can solve the issue of the economy, then it makes the crime situation even better.
This announcement was just made a couple days ago, but do you see the White House seizing on this in a way that this is going to become part of their strategy and other Republican strategy going into the midterms in an effort to crowd out some of the other issues and perhaps try to get voters to ignore his all-time low favorability?
Well, I think what you're going to see the White House do is, yes, they're going to take credit for what they've been able to successfully do. But they're also going to point out that it's not solved yet. And if you look at what's going on in North Carolina, where you had a very shocking murder in Charlotte, they're going to focus on that and what happened with the governor of North Carolina, and then they're going to continually highlight what's going on with illegal immigrants creating crime and violent crime. This is something that happened in Northern Virginia, and they're going to attack Democrats who they perceive as being weak on the crime issue. So yeah, they're going to have to. This is kind of a dual task for them. They're going to try to take credit for what's going on with the violent crime rate, but they're also going to blame Democrats for when the violent crime has happened in certain areas, and that's how they're going to play this, I think.
Yeah, how do they reconcile that by blaming Democrats, but also as we watch these crime rates go down?
Well, it's a difficult task, and I think that you're going to talk about where Democrats have failed in specific issues, and at the same time take credit for the general trends. It's not going to be easy because, as you just point out, it's kind of you're trying to take credit and then stoke fear, but that's what they're going to try to do.
This is not a controversial issue. This is something that we all agree is terrific. We all want crime to go down as low as possible. As Donald Trump claims victory, Andre, how do Democrats turn this into a winning message for them?
Well, there's another group of elected officials that want to take credit and in some cases should take credit, and those are mayors. If you want to win a national election, you better have the mayors on your side. And for most of Trump's first and second term, he disparaged larger cities, particularly majority black cities, Baltimore, Detroit, Chicago. He still, in many ways, disparages Chicago and those cities. And so Democrats, rightfully so, they're going to say, look at my city. Look at this city. Look what we've been able to do. And the research does point, if there's one thing that the research shows some impact, and it's these violent crime interrupters that are deployed. Now, Trump cut many of these budgets for these programs. And so if I'm a Democrat, I'm going to say, look what our mayors are doing, and look how Trump positioned himself against the mayor. So crime is being reduced in spite of someone's lack of support for our city.
Focus on the local and the statewide efforts. I want to dig into some of these very promising numbers. An FBI report on falling crime rates was shared by the White House before it was officially released. President Trump says it is proof that his approach is working. Our Alex Baird has been breaking down the stats in this report.
The FBI says violent crime stats have come crashing down in their largest year-to-year decrease since 1936. Now, Donald Trump says that is all because of him with actions like those. The White House has even called it the Trump effect. But let's have a look at how the FBI is breaking it down. Now, between 2024 and 2025, now let's just look at their website. There you can see it. Violent crimes more than 9% down. Murders, 18%. On the surface, that all looks pretty good for the president. But let's zoom out. When you look at the violent crime stats over the last 20 years, we're talking things like murders, rapes, aggravated assaults, robberies. You can see it's up and down sometimes, but generally it's trending downwards. Now, it's hard to credit that to one particular president because it's happened over multiple terms. In fact, the most recent decline happened under President Joe Biden in 2023. Let's take a look at the murder rate, for instance. It's now at 4.1 people per 100,000. That's the lowest it's been since 1956, but that's down from recent highs of 6.6 people per 100,000 hit under President Trump's last term, but also under President Biden. Regardless, the numbers are getting lower, substantially lower, and the FBI director says even this year it's still trending downwards. The trend is clear, but who's to credit? Not so much.
So here we are just over 2 months from the midterm elections. John, when you listen to voters, how much are they thinking about crime? And how much is this an issue that really resonates with the voters that matter the most in terms of winning these elections, those swing voters, those independent voters?
Yeah, if you look at the polling, Republicans are much more concerned about crime than Democrats typically. And the swing voters put the economy much higher. And then they also look at political leadership as a real issue. So from a polling perspective, going after those swing voters, Trump has to figure out some other kind of messaging strategy to go after them. A lot of them don't really like Trump, but they also don't particularly love Democrats, and they haven't really made up their mind which way they're going to vote. And if you look at all the crime statistics, yeah, and most crime is down in most areas, but in specific areas of the country, crime is not down, and it's still very dangerous, especially, and you can see this almost to a block where crime is really still very violent, and a lot of people are still getting killed, mostly because of drug activity and gang activity. So I wouldn't want to say that crime is completely solved, because it's not completely solved. And if you're a Republican, you're still very concerned about crime. And this is an issue that really you want to use to motivate your base.
No, it is certainly not completely solved. I mean, we here in D.C. Certainly feel it quite a bit. But Andre, to that point, how much is crime being used to drum up fear among voters?
Oh, absolutely. Crime and quite frankly, black male crime in particular has always been used as a cudgel and a political tool to drum up enthusiasm. If you have a president with low approval ratings, one of the things that you do, you go to these local issues, issues that really resonate with the spirit, not necessarily even the economic conditions that are taking place. So I'm certain that President Trump will talk about crime, both in places where it's still a problem, but also tout that some of this improvement occurred under his watch. But again, Democrats, if I would think, will just leverage the fact that in many of his the tax bill, many of his policies are undercutting his efforts to reduce crime. Again, income is correlated with crime reduction. Higher incomes, lower crime reduction. If your life is or it's made worse because of Trump's policies, you're going to look at any kind of touting of crime improvement skeptically. You're going to say, hey, but what about my life right now? Crime is off the table, so to speak. But what about my life? I don't necessarily have to worry about someone shooting me, but I can't get a job. I can't make ends meet. Life is unaffordable, resulting to maybe potentially involving yourself in crime. So he's in a tough spot because people use crime and violent crime conveniently, but you're not going to skirt these larger macro issues that all Americans are facing.
And a lot of Americans are feeling. Do you agree with John that some people might hear what we're talking about or see these statistics and say, that's not my experience. This is still really a huge problem for us.
Absolutely. It takes one murder in a neighborhood to send shockwaves through it. One son or daughter loss, one parent loss, an uncle loss. People don't feel 20%, 23% reduction.
Right.
They feel when there's no crime in their communities, when they can go to work, when they can get on a bus and feel safe, when they can walk safely to school. But again, as we get safer, Democrats need to take advantage to say, look, does your life feel better? Or is your well-being better off? And likewise, they also must point to the policies that can lead to greater crime. If you're cutting income, then it can lead to greater crime down the road.
Yeah, perfectly understandable that lived experience, anecdotes, stories that you're hearing from friends and loved ones are going to resonate a lot more than what you might be hearing on the news. On the policing side of things, John, obviously in the past few years, the phrase defund the police has come about. That does appear, however, on the Democratic progressive side to be on the wane. It was something that Republicans used rather effectively, I think, against a number of Democrats. Do you think Democrats have been able to To what extent do you think Democrats have done away with that message, and have they landed on a better one when it comes to policing?
I don't know. I think they're hugely vulnerable on that, and I think it's indefensible to say that we should defund the police. And I think Republicans are going to nail on that.
Are you hearing that as much now, and for this cycle?
Well, there's every quote lasts forever on the internet, and believe me, they're going to use these in 30-second commercials. And let me make a thing about what Trump has been able to do, because he's been very effective in hiring prosecutors that are going to actually put people in jail, and showing some leadership on crime actually does cut down crime. And I tell you, I lived on the Hill, Capitol Hill, during the pandemic and after the pandemic, and stores were literally emptied out. They had to put everything behind a lock and key, because kids would come in and just take anything they wanted, because they knew that Biden's prosecutors would not prosecute any crimes. And Muriel Bowser, who was the mayor of D.C., and that didn't happen just in D.C., it happened in Chicago, it had to happen in almost every major city, where they knew that Biden prosecutors were not going to do anything about violent crime. And so the Republicans did take a real concerted effort. And, everyone talks about how a waste of money this National Guard is, and maybe it hasn't done everything it promised to do, but it stabilized things on Capitol Hill. And let me make another point about the National Guard. What I heard most of the criticism of National Guard is it wasn't going to the neighborhoods where the crime was the worst, which were in black neighborhoods in Anacostia. And a lot of the residents that live there, they wanted the National Guard because they were tired of the routine crime, the routine murders that still happen in D.C. And you can see it. Some of these statistics are fine, but they're not. This is not definitely solved in some of the worst neighborhoods, and that's where most of the crime is happening.
But there is data to suggest that the National Guard has had very little impact in Washington.
Yeah, I don't trust the data. I just don't trust that data, and it's all about.
So you think
it's all about leadership. It's all about leadership. And when a criminal thinks, you know what, I can get away with this. And we saw this with carjackings in D.C. Under Joe Biden. He went crazy. The carjackings were out of control in D.C., absolutely out of control. Trump comes in and says, we're not going to put up with this anymore. And he had prosecutors that started prosecuting it. And the carjackings stopped.
So you think the National Guard is being kept here because they're actually being effective, not just because of the messaging?
I think it sends a signal to criminals to saying that we're not going to do this anymore. And the biggest tragedy of the National Guard is they're not going in the worst neighborhoods and stopping crime there, because that's where people are getting killed routinely.
Andre, do you think Democrats still have a messaging problem when it comes to policing?
They do, largely because it's a generational indoctrination of violent crime is in our midst, and it is very hard to get rid of that stigma. By the way, most Democrats don't say defund the police. No. You just don't hear that anymore. But what's interesting is the deployment of the National Guard is largely a waste of public resources. What they are doing, we have seen a reduction in larceny, so petty theft and carjackings and the like. That is true. But in terms of violent crime, it's had no impact on violent crime. But you're paying the National Guard something like almost 2/3 more than what you would pay local law enforcement for. So we are wasting money that could be going into the services that actually reduce crime. And in many ways, that's what defund the police was all about. It was not necessarily get rid of the police, but because what polling data shows, black people in particular, it's not that they want less police, they want quality policing. And so, but if you're removing money, taking money off the table to move towards this mobilization of the National Guard, you're just wasting an opportunity to actually improve these numbers even more. So if I was a Democrat in this situation, I would bring that up. But no Democrat is saying defund the police because it's a political trap.
Well, actually, last year a lot of Democrats were saying defund the police, and El Sayed, who won in Michigan. Last year, he was saying defund the police. So, yeah, they're not saying defund the police right now, but they did. And there's still a great distrust of Democrats who might want to do that again.
And Republicans still very keen to label them with this.
Absolutely. And I would also make the point, you're right about the violent crime. And then if the National Guard was going to do this job, they should go to Ward 7 and Ward 8, where most of the violent crime is actually happening. And it's a slaughter of kids that is really continuing to this day. And you see it all the time. There was just like the other day, a 3-year-old was shot and killed because of the drug wars. This stuff has got to stop. It's unacceptable.
But this is why there's long-term solutions and there's short-term solutions as well. If we ignore the long-term solutions, you're always going to have crime. We've seen a loss of investment in education, not getting quality jobs in 7th and 8th Ward. And these are the things that cause crime. Yes, we need to deal with the acute issues that we face, murders and the like. And that's actually improving. But if you keep take your eye off the ball and not address these long-term solutions, which the tax bill is ignoring, that it's making conditions worse for people in the 7th and the 8th Ward. That is the problem. For generation after generation, these communities have not been invested in. And the result is higher violent crime. And so, yes, they will try to take advantage of it and spotlight the incidents of murder, and they should. It is harmful to our communities. With that said, the ultimate solution is something Trump and his colleagues are not providing.
All right. So from the top and from the bottom, it needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would make the observation that D.C. spends more per capita on education than any other city in the world. It's really remarkable how much they spend, and the quality is just not happening. I would make the other observation is it's the drug situation in the 7th and 8th Ward that's really driving most of this. And, you know, the Democrats have been pushing for drug legalization for quite a while. I mean, and that's gotten markedly worse in the 7th and 8th wards. Yes, and I believe that we need to do more investing in those wards when it comes to more jobs and things like that. But you're not going to get more investment if you don't get the crime situation settled. And that means, yeah, more cops, but the cops were slashed. The police force was slashed during the Biden years. And people didn't really want to work there anymore because they weren't backing up the cops. And that all happened because of this defund the police movement. You know, this goes back to this antipathy to law enforcement, which has really kind of driven, you know, a lot of this anger towards the police. And that's why they didn't want to re-up. And so the solution, yes, I agree with Andre on the idea that you need to have longer term solutions, but you need to stabilize the drug war. You need to stop the killing. And it's just the killing of these young people really drives me crazy.
What you heard is what Republicans will say. And my response would be, nothing stops a bullet like a job. And if my job situation is worse, which it's worse than it was under Biden, I would start trumpeting that language. Where's the job? That's going to really curtail the violent crime. Where's the job? Where are the benefits? Where are the more enrichment for our schools? Those are the things, because right now, I think that look at what happened at 7th and 8th Ward. That's going to wear thin after a while. After year after year of violent crime reduction, you just can't use that rhetoric. It's just going to fall flat. And they're going to look for other things on the political agenda.
What about immigration enforcement, John, where we have seen federal agents in cities across the country? We have seen American citizens and people who are legally allowed to be here be killed by some of these federal agents. How much of an issue and how much of a problem is that for Republicans politically?
It's not that much of a problem for Republicans. The Republican base really does like the deportation of violent criminals out of the country.
But even if we have all these examples of federal agents going over the top and actually killing people?
You have many more examples of violent criminals, violent illegal aliens killing people, and that's highlighted almost every day. And we just saw that actually in Northern Virginia, where a illegal alien just killed a woman that he was having some sort of relationship with. So, yeah, I mean, you know, listen, I think that the issue here is that for swing voters, I think ICE went over the top. But for the Republican base, they actually secretly like the idea that you're getting rid of violent criminals and deporting them out of the country.
But Republicans or Democrats, they don't want to see their neighbors, the people who are considered members of the community. They don't want to see them go. Because they see firsthand that they're not committing crimes. They're the clerks at their grocery store. They're the landscapers. They're the people in agriculture. We don't talk about the thousands of agricultural workers who are contributing to society. What we saw during that January, where 2 Americans were killed, where people were deported for whatever reason, what we saw was Americans of all stripes saying, that's not what Trump said he was going to do. And that feeling of, oh, these are our neighbors, that is thick, regardless of party. And I think this, again, using the same old rhetoric around how violent immigrants are, it just won't hold up to the day-to-day actions of residents.
Well, thank you both for an incredibly smart and impassioned conversation. You've certainly convinced me that this is going to be a major factor in the coming months when it comes to the midterms. So I appreciate you coming in. Andre Perry from Brookings Institution and John Feehery, a Republican strategist. Really appreciate it. And that's all for myself and the team here in Washington. I want to hand it back to Rosalind Jordan and Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha.
That's it for this edition of This is America. On Friday's show, we'll take a look at whether the war with Iran is changing President Trump's approach to nuclear diplomacy. That's at 18:30 GMT, 2:30 p.m. Eastern here in the U.S. From all of us here in Washington, have a good one.